Camshafts. Reliability. Chinese manufacturing. Go ahead, light it up. Light up the comment section. I've got my popcorn. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. KTM is a recognized leader in off-road performance motorcycles, and about 5 years ago in 2019 they introduced a bike called the KTM 790 Adventure R. That bike made big waves in the motorcycle industry because of its low-slung fuel tank that lowered the center of gravity, the high-performance suspension, high-performance engine, and so on. Since then, we've seen updates to this 790/890/901 platform. Husqvarna introduced the Norden 901 based on the same motorcycle, just with different bodywork. Then we also saw an update to the 890 engine a couple years after introduction from the original 790. That was largely due to meet Euro 5 emissions requirements and other things like that. So we saw a bump up in engine power and engine torque. Then last year, for the 2023 model year, KTM updated the platform again with a change to the bodywork, a revised instrument cluster, slightly revised electronics, and some other minor tweaks here and there. That brings us to today. So in 2024, KTM have introduced this model, the 790 Adventure. That brings us to today, 2024. KTM have introduced this bike, the 790 Adventure. It's made by their partners CFMOTO in China, and it's designed to replace the base model 890 Adventure in the lineup and to offer a lower priced, more street-oriented alternative to the 890 Adventure R. Priced at just $10,999 here in the US, this appears to be quite possibly the best value in adventure motorcycling for around this price point. But the question is it? So let's find out. All right, before we get into the review, I think it's probably best if we talk about the elephant in the room, which is obviously the camshaft issues that KTM have been experiencing lately. So I actually already filmed a little segment about this when I filmed the review of the 790, which is a couple weeks ago now, and that bike's already actually gone back to KTM. Right after I filmed that, I got an email, I should say we, KTM owners, got a mass email communication from KTM Public Relations, which is right here, talking about and addressing that camshaft issue. So I wanted to refilm this so I could talk about KTM's response. So it's probably best if I just stick to the facts that I know and try not to inject my personal opinion into any of this. Fact number one, I have owned a lot of KTMs and I've never had any significant engine issues. Now I have not put a ton of miles on those bikes, to be fair, but I just wanted to share that. Number two is that there is an issue with the camshafts on some of these 790 and 890 motors. If you look online, there's tons of evidence of that, so I think we can say that's a fact. Third fact is that KTM have issued a response here, an email, which is now circulated around the internet and social media. They've sent this to KTM owners, and I suppose because I've purchased, gosh, 5 or 10 KTMs over the past 5 or 10 years, I'm definitely on their mail list. It'd be kind of crazy if I wasn't. So I'm going to go over that right now. Some other facts of this case, there is a Facebook group with about 10,000 members dedicated to talking about the camshaft issues with the 790 and 890 engines. Now, does that mean there are 10,000 people who have bad camshafts? No, it just means that there are 10,000 people in a Facebook group. Another fact is that there's a 150 plus page thread on the motorcycle forum advrider.com, very popular forum for adventure bikes, which I've been a member of since basically back when they started 20 years ago, discussing the issue, documenting it, talking about it, and of course a lot of speculation about what's going on. So those are all facts. So let me read the email that KTM sent. It says, "Hello Ian, here's an important update on handling the camshaft topic for selected KTM models. First, we would like to extend our apologies to the people who feel affected by the camshaft topic. We see and hear all feedback we can, whether it's online, via authorized KTM dealers, or simply through community chatter. To best equip our authorized KTM dealer network, we issued a communication on how to inspect camshafts if customers report issues on the following motorcycles: KTM 790 Duke, 2018, 19, and 20, KTM 790 Adventure, model year 18, 19, and 20. Now, a quick pause. It seems to be based on the facts we can see on the internet and documented cases of 890 camshafts and the Husky 901, by the way, which is the same exact motor. There's documented cases of those having problems, so I'm a little bit unsure as to why this only refers to the 790. Going on, investigations have shown that a large proportion of these camshafts that are the subject of complaints are in order. In these cases, it is not a question of wear, but mostly just discoloration or running marks that have formed on the running surface of the cams or on the bearing points of the shafts and can be removed by cleaning. The overall quality and integrity of the camshaft itself is not the problem. Please visit your authorized KTM dealer in case you have experienced the following symptoms: poor starting behavior, clearly audible, unusual running noises from the engine, and noticeably reduced engine power. If the camshafts are found to be damaged during an inspection by an authorized KTM dealer, they will be replaced. The cost of replacing damaged camshafts will be borne by KTM under the Goodwill scheme. If customers have already ordered a camshaft replacement for affected models from an authorized KTM dealer in the past, KTM will re-examine new Goodwill applications to the authorized KTM dealer network. If the conditions explained in the statement and in the communication to the authorized KTM dealer network are met, subsequent Goodwill may be considered. KTM takes product quality seriously and continuously drives the development of its products. As part of the continuous development of our products and to improve the quality and wear behavior of the engine, we have introduced wider rocker arms from model year 2021 and an additional oil strainer from model year 2020 to improve the overall performance and quality of the engine. Both adaptations simultaneously revolve the contributing factors mentioned above. Once again, we apologize for any inconvenience or hassle that any of our customers may have experienced. So that's the message that all of us received from KTM. So they are acknowledging issues with certain bikes and saying that there's a Goodwill program to fix it. However, I think there are legitimate questions about the scope of how many bikes this affects and whether it affects 890s, which it seems to based on multiple documented cases on the internet. And also kind of the question of how KTM is going to follow up and deal with any cases that come up. So those are all the facts that I have. This review of the 790 Adventure, like all my reviews, is a review of the performance, features, technology, specs, and comparisons of the bike to its competition. So it really focuses on that. But I felt it was wise to put this discussion right up front to get it out of the way. With that, let's continue with the review. All right, as we get started into this review, I have a question for you. This motorcycle is made in China. Now, my question is simple. Would that prevent you from purchasing this motorcycle? And why or why not? So drop that down in the comments below. Let's have a civil discussion. And while you do that, I'm gonna have some more popcorn. All right, let's cover models and pricing for the 790 Adventure, and let's kind of understand where this fits into the scheme of things in the KTM lineup. Now let's back up a second. So the parent company to KTM is called Pierre Mobility Group. They're in charge of a lot of things from bicycles to other things like that. They have Husqvarna, they have KTM, and they have Gas. They also have a partnership with Bajaj in India to make like the smaller motorcycles. Now they have a partnership with CFMOTO in China to produce bikes over there, that some of which are sold, you know, under other brands, but a lot of which are sold as KTMs, like the 790 Adventure. So they're busy, they're up to a lot. And of course it makes sense in the modern world and the modern economy that companies are gonna do things like this to reduce their costs and hopefully increase their profits. So the 890 Adventure, the base model, this is the bike that I purchased for review. I think I did this series like about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago to 18 months ago. I bought that and did that. So at least here in the US, this replaces that bike. So that base 890 Adventure, I think was around $13,000. Right in there. This is $10,999, much lower price, and this effectively replaces the base model, at least here in the US, although I've heard in some other countries you might still be able to get that. The only differences were that on that 890, well, you got a slightly larger engine than this bike. Everything else was the same except the suspension was slightly different. Still the WP Apex like you see on the 790, but you had some adjustment clickers on the front fork, and I think the rear shock was the same as this with basically no adjustment, but you did have some fork adjustments on that base 890 Adventure, which you don't get on the 790. That brings me to the 890 Adventure R. So KTM is still offering the 890 Adventure R as the off-road up-spec bike in the lineup. So that bike is $15,700, which is $4,800 more than this 790 Adventure. Now, what do you get for that? Well, you get a totally different suspension setup. You go from WP Apex to WP Explorer. You get full adjustments. You get 40 millimeters or about 1.5 inches more travel. Very different motorcycle, higher seat height. You get a higher fender and a lower windshield, and the bike is set up much more to go off-road and be aggressive during off-road riding. Now, can you notice the difference in power between the 790 and the 890? Yes, but it's not huge. When I'm riding the 790, I don't feel like I have like a big power reduction versus the 890s that I'm used to. You do notice it, but honestly, this is still 95 horsepower, more than enough. And if you rode them blindfolded back to back, you might not be able to tell that much difference in terms of power and torque. Now the pricing, coming back to pricing for the 790 Adventure, it's $10,999 US, but the caveat to that is if you don't buy the tech, so they sell the cruise control and the quick shifter and a few of the other things like that are optional extras. The bike comes with the hardware for it, but then you have to pay to have it unlocked by the dealer. So to get the tech pack, which includes a lot of those common features, it's around $800, somewhere in there. So your real price for most people, because almost everybody's going to get that, because it'd be very strange to have a cruise control button that doesn't work and a quick shifter hardware that doesn't work. Most people are going to get that. So your real price is more like $11,800 instead of that $10,999. So keep that in mind. All right, let's do specs and features on the 790 Adventure. So the wet weight, fully fueled up and ready to ride, is 470 pounds or 213 kilograms. The engine is a parallel twin. It is 799 cc. It makes 95 horsepower or 64 foot-pounds of torque or 87 newton meters. Now let's talk about the engine for a minute. The 2024 790 engine is not the same engine as the old 790 Adventure was back in 2018, 2019. It is quite a bit different, and this is important to understand. So they made a lot of changes to make it smoother and better. So it has a 20% increase in crankshaft weight, which increases and makes it smoother, low RPM and low speed performance, and I definitely noticed that. It has better combustion and better fuel efficiency. They've reworked the throttle bodies. It has a different knock control system, so you can have better tolerance for putting low octane fuel. It's a Euro 5 bike, so it's been improved to meet those Euro 5 standards. It also has a new exhaust, a new redesigned catalytic converter, a new clutch, and a bigger airbox. And all these things add up to a little bit more of a refined and better riding experience than the previous 790 engine. And in fact, I think I actually prefer this engine to the 890 engine, which may be a surprising statement, but I find this seems to run a little bit smoother and doesn't exhibit some of the vibration and some of the starting issues that I've had on the 890s that I've owned. So I really like this new engine. Transmission is a 6-speed cable clutch. You do get a slipper clutch, which is great. Front suspension is WP Apex. It's 43 millimeter, and the travel is 200 millimeter or 7.9 inches. And you have no adjustments to the front fork at all. And then your rear shock is WP Apex. You have a preload adjustment, although the preload is on like this little collar and they don't give you a hydraulic adjuster, which is kind of a bummer. 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters of travel. Front brake is dual 4-piston radial calipers, 320 millimeter discs, and of course you have cornering ABS, which is switchable. I should mention this bike has an IMU or an inertial measurement unit, so the traction control and ABS are tied to all sorts of sensors, which make it safer and make those rider aids much more responsive. Rear brake is a twin piston caliper, single disc, 260 millimeters. Tires are 21/18, so in the front you have a 90/90/21, in the back you have a 150/70/18, and it comes with these Pirelli Rally Scorpion STR tires, which are kind of like, in my opinion, like a 70% road, 30% off-road tire. The bike has a rake angle of 25.9 degrees. Fuel capacity is 5.3 gallons or 20 liters, which gives you an incredible fuel range of 250 miles or 400 kilometers or more, due to the fact that when I've been testing this bike, I get nearly around 60 miles a gallon, or like, what is that, 3.9 liter per 100 kilometers. So I'm seeing very good fuel economy and range. Ground clearance is pretty respectable at 9 inches or 230 millimeters. Taking a look at the lighting of the bike, you can see the distinctive KTM running light signature halo around the lamps, LED front turn signals. The bike does come with 4-way flashers, and I really do appreciate that. And then you've got the rear lights here, which are pretty good, all LED, so that's nice. Let's go ahead and turn off our hazards. While we have the bike turned on, let's look at our controls and electronics and TFT and all these things. So over here, you have a clutch lever. Both the levers are adjustable for reach, which is nice. You've got these handguards, which are, well, this one's loose, but they provide pretty good protection. You've got really easy to use controls, cruise control switch, high beam. The mirrors are different than on the 890, but they actually seem to work a little bit better. And I actually like these mirrors better than the ones on the 890. Backlit switch gear, which is very, very nice to have. So that's great. Adjustable handlebar positions, you can actually move that front and back, so I love having that feature. Our windshield, which is pretty decent, and it's got this cutout to reduce buffeting. And then here in our TFT, the TFT is, I think, around 5 inches, and it's pretty good. I have it in the dark mode, which I prefer. And you've got, tach, speedometer, different readouts, gear position. You've got lights, indicator lights across the top. You can customize these favorites here along the bottom and put all sorts of information. I have it set to fuel consumption, odometer, trip computer, and battery voltage, but you can change that to be whatever you want. Speaking of that, if we hit set, we can go into our menu. If we go to motorcycle, we can go to ride mode. You can configure your traction control and MSR, quick shift to turn that off and on. I'm not going to go into all this, but you can do a lot of different stuff in here. You can go to a bike info screen, which shows you all sorts of information about what's going on with the bike. You have trip computers, you can go into your settings, you can program your favorites, you can program the quick select, which is a shortcut for up and down. I always program the top one to like the ride mode, and then the bottom one, I used to do it with heated grips when I had the heated grips on my personal 890 last year. You can set up a lot of things. It's pretty easy to navigate, very intuitive, and I like that. And then so the ride modes, we should talk about that. So again, I've got my up button programmed to ride mode. So if I go in here, I can change the street, rain, off-road, and rally. The differences are street is your normal street riding mode. Rain is it reduces the throttle response and makes the ABS and traction control more sensitive. Off-road is like a pre-programmed off-road mode, which gives you a level of off-road traction control and turns off the rear ABS. Rally mode turns off the rear ABS as well, but then it gives you a 9-level adjustable traction control on the fly. I always set my rally mode to be off-road throttle because I don't like the rally throttle. So if I set that, if I go into rally mode, let's do that, select it, go back out. Now you can see I've got my 9-level slip control, which is absolutely amazing and definitely one of the best things about this bike. You get a low front fender on this version. The R models will have that high front dirt bike style fender, which would prevent mud and rocks from getting jammed in there. Although you can convert this if you wanted to. You have tubeless spoked wheels. You've got the skid plate. This one has a little extra guard there on the front of the skid plate. You can see the side fairings, pretty good protection for the tank. Pretty decently strong plastic handguards, which can take some pretty good impacts. Pretty good sized foot pegs for stock. I like the brake lever. You can actually flip that over and make it lower or higher. You can see our exhaust and engine. It's a pretty lightweight exhaust, actually. It's funny, people always upgrade the exhaust to save like 3 pounds. I'm like, what's the point of that? It doesn't really make any sense. Rear rack, rear grab handles. There's tools, place to store tools under these side panels. You have a 2-piece seat on this model, and you can adjust the front seat up or down about 3/4 inch or about 20 millimeters. We've already talked about the lights in the back, the tires, the chain drive, not much more to really talk about here. And yeah, that's about it. All right, let's talk about the ergonomic seating position, seat height, and then do our kind of drop and lift test with the 790 Adventure. So one of the reasons you might be looking at the 790 is because it doesn't have the high seat height of some other adventure bikes, or its counterpart, the 890 Adventure R. So you're looking at 33 inches in the low position or 840 millimeters, and then you can raise the seat up into the higher position if you want more legroom, if you're a little taller. That's going to be 33.8 inches or 860 millimeters. And overall, they're about 1.5 inches or about 30 or 40 millimeters lower than like an 890 Adventure R. So pretty good. So let me kind of show you how this looks. So I am 5'11" or 178 centimeters tall. I have a 32-inch inseam. And you can see like how much bend in my knee I have when I'm touching the ground. Like it's extremely comfortable for me to be able to reach the ground with this bike. I really, really like that. So it's going to be a good bike for some of those shorter riders out there. Now, the other thing that low seat height does is it brings the whole center of gravity of the bike down pretty low. So I can, lean this over. I can lean this over a lot and I still feel really comfortable, not like I'm going to drop it. In terms of the ergonomics for riding, so you can see the seating position is very neutral, upright. There's pretty good leg room. I have the seat in the lower position right now. Just for reference, the reach to the bars is very comfortable, natural. It's a very comfortable riding position. I don't feel cramped or like I have a lack of room whatsoever. All right, so now it's time to do the drop test. So what I'm gonna do, I'm starting to do this in the videos now, is I'm gonna kind of lean it over as far as I can to see how I can like hold it up to show you kind of the center of gravity of the bike, and then we'll go ahead and let it drop. Now this bike's got pretty good handguards from the factory. They're plastic, but they're pretty strong. It's got the great crash protection. That's a huge advantage of this platform, is that you don't need to add any crash protection. It's already ready to go. Saves a lot of weight, a lot of cost. I really, really appreciate that design. So I can lean it over really, really far without feeling like it's going to fall. So right about here is where it feels like it's going to fall. So let's... All right, so here's the bike on the ground. You can see, yeah, they fall relatively flat, but you have this pivot point with the side of the fuel tank here that's going to help us lift it. You can see how it falls here. But really, this motorcycle is designed to crash. It's designed to fall over. It's a very rugged design, and it's one of my favorite adventure bikes for that reason. This kind of gives us a good view of the skid plate and the underside here. So we can see here the coverage of the factory skid plate, and you can see it does, this bike's been ridden. It's a little bit thin on the metal of your skid plate. It's definitely pretty thin and flexible, but it's moderate protection. It's decent, and I like how they bring it back here to kind of cover the catalytic converter as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and lift this bike up. As far as adventure motorcycles go in this weight range, it's definitely the easiest bike to lift in this weight category because of this and the low center of gravity. It's really not too bad at all. All right, looking at my notes here, let's talk about maintenance on the 790 Adventure. So your minor service interval, which is an oil change and basic checks like that, KTM is quoting very long intervals, 9,000 miles or 15,000 kilometers for an oil change. Would I personally do that on my own bike? No, I would not go more than about 4,000 or 5,000 miles. Personally, on a motorcycle, the way I ride them anyway, that's just me. They're quoting a major service interval. That's going to be your valve clearance inspection and other checks like that. That's going to be every 18,000 miles or every 30,000 kilometers. Other maintenance notes that I would have, KTMs in general are very easy to work on. Actually, they're very user-friendly to work on and quick to access stuff. KTM designed these bikes with the air filter under the seat. So all you have to do is pop the seat off, and then you have an airbox lid, pop that off. Within like 2 minutes, you have access to clean your air filter, replace your air filter. It comes with a paper cartridge. A lot of people put a pre-filter on top of that, where there's a KTM option, there's aftermarket options, but the air filtration, although they have, well, now that I say that, they have had some spotty issues with that in terms of dust going past that. But in general, if you keep things clean, keep things set up properly and check that, you should be okay. And you have very easy access to your air filter. Other maintenance is just going to be your basic stuff. like changing your hydraulic fluids every couple of years, checking your chain tension, and things like that. All right, KTM 790 Adventure out on the highway. For some reason, my microphone was unplugged from my camera during this segment, which I didn't realize until I went to edit the video, so we'll do a little voiceover here. So overall, the 790 Adventure is a pretty nice place to be out on the open road. The engine vibration, I feel, is actually a little bit less than KTM's 890 Adventure, which is a little bit surprising, but something to note. The RPM is pretty low at cruising speeds. Anything below about 80 miles an hour, your RPM doesn't get too high, so it's a pretty nice place to be. It doesn't feel like the engine is working too hard. Let's talk about the wind protection. So you can see here that the windshield is taller on this bike than the R model KTM, and it's got this cutout here, this hole kind of in the upper 2/3 that does a pretty good job controlling the wind buffeting and turbulence. I would give the overall wind protection a solid B, and keep in mind that there are aftermarket options available for this. You've got cruise control, which is very easy to operate. Although it doesn't hold your speed perfectly well, it does tend to fluctuate a little bit when you go up and down hills. The quick shifter works very, very well and is really nice to have that, although you do have to make sure you pay the extra money to get that activated. Comfort overall, I think on this bike is pretty good. I would give it, again, like a solid B. It's not going to be a GS or a Goldwing or something like that, but for an adventure bike, it's pretty good. The seat's pretty good, the wind protection's pretty good, and overall, it's not a bad place to spend some time. The mirrors, I actually really like the mirrors on the 790. They're not too buzzy below about 80 miles an hour, and they work pretty well and give a pretty good view.
Okay, let's get the 790 on a mountain road here with some corners. Throw this thing through some corners, talk about the sporting performance of the 790. Oh man, this thing is really good. Let me slow down so I can talk a little bit. I don't know what else to say. It's very, very good. It handles well. The turn-in is not the fastest, but it's pretty good. I mean, keep in mind, it's a 21-inch front wheel. The motor's very responsive. It's fast. The quick shifter works good. The brakes are pretty good. They're great. They're not the best in the world, but they're pretty darn good. I don't know, man. I mean, this thing is really fun to ride. Adventure bikes have gotten so good that they kind of make street bikes almost seem kind of pointless unless you're a track rider. Now, I've ridden and owned all this platform in all the different models, right? 890 Rally, Norda 901, the 890R, 790R, back when they had that. The base 890, the lower one, which is the same height as this 790. So here's what I'll tell you. If you want sporty street riding, and a lot of people don't talk about this, if you want the sporty street handling, the lower bikes with less suspension travel are way better. They handle way better. They feel more confident on the highway. Of course, it also has to do with tire choice, but I'm telling you, you can ride these faster. Being lower to the ground, that lower center of gravity and that shorter suspension travel makes for a better street bike. It just does. That's why street bikes don't have 250 millimeters of suspension travel. They have 120 millimeters, right? So anyway, that's something that I really wanted to point out. Okay, let's do our 0 to 80 to 0 acceleration and braking testing. I'd say that's pretty good. So I just don't think you need more power than whatever this is, 95 or 100 horsepower. I don't see how you really need more power than that. You might want more, but this thing is fast enough to go to jail, fast enough for a closed casket funeral, you know, whatever you want to say, right? Yeah, it's kind of like a giant supermoto bike. So I love these bikes so much, you know. They're so good off-road, and then you get on the street and they're so fun on the street. You could just have this bike and you'd be fine. I mean, just one bike, this is it. Okay, KTM 790 Adventure off-road testing. So we'll start with our suspension test course, which I like to use on all the bikes, talk about that. You know, this platform has obviously some incredible advantages versus all the competition. It's almost not even fair, really. The low center of gravity, the mass centralization, the compact engine, the low fuel tank, all that makes the bike handle like a much lighter motorcycle than the competition. There's different suspension depending on what model you get, but if you get the 790, obviously we have the more budget spec suspension, but we're about to talk about that. Ergonomics are quite good for off-road. Even the factory pegs are not bad. Handlebars are good. So I like to use, in fact, let me show you something. This bike is so easy, I can almost drop it and then easily lift it up just because of that low center of gravity. Try doing that with the 1290 or GS. So the electronics are amazing on this bike. I use rally mode off-road 100% of the time. I don't like the rally throttle response, however, so I changed that to the off-road throttle response, which it then saves that setting for rally mode. If you use rally throttle, it's too harsh and abrupt, in my opinion. Very snappy, but too much. The off-road's much better. And then ABS is tied to the ride mode, so when you go into off-road mode or rally mode, it turns off your rear ABS, leaves your front ABS on, which is exactly the setup I want. So that's perfect. And then the slip control 1 through 9 when you're in rally mode. So you have to pay a little bit extra to get this. But if you get one of these bikes, I'm going to tell you right now, it is so important to get the tech pack, which unlocks the cruise and the rally mode, all that stuff. It adds so much to the bike. So 1 through 9. 9 is most intrusive, is almost like street traction control. 1 is almost off, and I use that like in the sand and things like that. So on a dirt road like this, I kind of like to use 6 or 7. It allows me to have quite a bit of slide, but still keep me in control. You can grab so much throttle in slippery conditions, and the bike will save your butt. It is so effective. It is like cheating. They had some of the best off-road riders in the world develop and tune this system, and it's still class-leading electronics for an adventure bike. This thing is so quick. Man, you can ride these bikes so fast. You really got to watch yourself. Okay, so as we get into the rough stuff here, and I'm able to ride this bike pretty fast, so let's talk about that. When you have these more budget suspension setups, it goes one of two ways, right? They either give you a really soft suspension, which makes the ride really smooth. This is like a Transalp or a V-Strom or a bike like that. Or they give you kind of a firm setup, which makes the ride kind of harsh and jiggly and kind of rough, but the advantage to that setup is you can ride pretty quick without bottoming it out, and it feels very sporty. And of course, being KTM, that's the route they've taken with the 790. So you can ride, it gets pretty rocky here, and I don't want to do any damage or crash, but you can ride this thing surprisingly quick for a budget suspension setup or a kind of a budget adventure bike. So the ride is you know, it's not the smoothest, most plush ride, and by the way, there's no adjustments other than the rear preload, so you can't really change it, but I feel it's a pretty good compromise, because as you can see, I'm able to haul butt through here pretty good. There's some pretty big washouts on this road. In fact, yeah, these big water crossings. Let's see if I can bottom it out on this one. Nope, no, I didn't bottom it out. Wow, that's surprising. This bike's really good. So yeah, it is kind of a firm setup. It is kind of a harsh ride, but you can ride it fast, and I think that's a good compromise that they've made. The only way around this kind of compromise, right, is to spend a ton of money on a suspension that can be both plush and supportive at high speed at the same time. But in order to do that, you've got to spend a ton of money. Standing up, sitting down, either way feels pretty natural on this bike. Good ergonomics. I feel like I have great control, and it's a fantastic off-road adventure bike. All right, let's run back and forth through the sand wash with the 790. Sand is very dry, very loose right now. It's August, it's the middle of summer here in North America. I've been in sand on these Pirelli tires before and gotten stuck on other bikes, so I know they're not good sand tires, and we're going to have to really keep our momentum and revs really high. Now I've got my traction control and my rally slip control way down to level 1, so I've got plenty of wheel spin and power there so I don't get stuck. And yeah, I know this bike's going to be pretty good in sand because I've owned so many of these, and because they're just very lightweight and easy to handle, it just makes life a lot better compared to like a bigger adventure bike. Whoa, wow, that is really soft right now. Really soft, deep sand. Okay, let's make a run back through. Okay, yeah, really no problem. Even with these subpar tires, the bike performs very well in sand because of all the advantages that this bike has.
All right, let's talk about the competition for the 790 Adventure. I've got a chart here, which I'm going to put up on the screen so you can see this to show you, what I think the main competitors are to this bike in terms of the price point and features, to give you that information. But let's talk this through just a little bit. I don't just want to read off the Excel document because that gets a little bit boring. So 790 Adventure with the tech back is $11,800. Tenere 700, $10,800. Transalp 750 is $99.99. A V-Strom 800 DE is $11,599. And a Tuareg 660 from Aprilia is $12,299. Okay, so here's how this breaks down. If you just want the most performance for your money and you don't care about other factors, just get the KTM. Well, let me talk about the Aprilia in a second. But if you look at the horsepower, the features, all of that for the dollar, the 790 Adventure, I think offers the most on this list. Cruise control, tubeless wheels, quick shifter, assuming you get that tech pack, which I factored into the price here. You get the amazing slide control, the rally mode system that this bike offers, pretty easy maintenance. Again, the most power of this group by a pretty significant margin. So that's all there. Now I've ranked the bike, so you can see I have a ranking. This lower number would be better because obviously number 1 is what you want to get. So like for off-road on this list, the Tuareg gets number 1. I give the 790 Adventure 2. I think it's ahead of the T7, the Transalp, and the V-Strom 800 DE off-road. On-road, I gave the 790 the highest score. On-road performance, so handling, power, braking, all that kind of stuff. I think the 790 is the best of this group. And then comfort. Comfort is, the wind protection, the seating comfort, the engine heat, all those things that give you a comfortable ride to ride all day. So for me, the Transalp 750 by far is the best choice on this list for comfort. You don't get engine heat on that. You have a very good seat, very good wind protection, no vibration, very comfortable motorcycle to have. And then the V-Strom comes next, although it has really bad engine heat, then the KTM, then the Aprilia, and then the T7. Don't get mad at me for ranking, you know, the T7 last in on-road and the last in comfort. It just is. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on all these motorcycles on this list. The T7 comes in last in those areas. Now, the T7 might be the bike I would buy based on some other factors like reliability and aftermarket parts availability, but just keep that in mind. And then fun factor, the Aprilia is the most fun on this list, in my opinion, to ride. It has an amazing sound. It has the best suspension. Has really good performance all around. So yeah. What bike would I buy in this group? If I was going to own the bike long term, like 5 years and put a lot of miles on it, a T7, like no question, because I don't have to worry about it breaking down ever. They don't break. T7s don't break. And for long-term ownership, that's what I like. If I was buying it for a couple years and I'm probably not going to put a ton of miles on it, the Tuareg is my favorite bike to ride in this group by far, but long-term ownership is more of a question mark. You know, little problems come up, and dealerships are few and far between. You have to factor a lot of these things in. Okay, pro and con summary for the 790 Adventure as I chew my popcorn here. The pros for me of the 790 Adventure, I think that it actually runs slightly smoother than the 890, which is funny to say that because this is the more budget model. It doesn't seem to have the starting issues, the cold start issues that the 890s have had. At least I've never experienced it with this particular test bike. And there seems to be a little bit less vibration overall than the 890 when you're going down the highway. The second thing for me is the cost and the value for money, the performance per dollar is extremely high on this motorcycle. Yes, of course, you can go out and buy the new Himalayan 450 for $5,700, which is half the price of this, but it's 40 horsepower. This is almost 100 horsepower and all the features and everything like that. So you have to keep those things in mind when you're talking about value, but I think this is an extremely good value, and we'll do competition in a separate segment. The fun factor, this motorcycle, you know, is incredibly fun to ride. It's responsive, lightweight, and fast, and decent suspension, so it's fun. The handling and the low center of gravity, it's agile, both on and off road. The low center of gravity makes it feel like a much lighter motorcycle than it is on paper, so love that. Next pro for me, the electronics package on this bike is superb. Assuming you get the tech pack and you unlock the rally mode and all that. The 9-level traction control is phenomenal. Best off-road electronics in the industry by far, so good with the slip control. The ABS is tied to the ride mode, so no separate setting for that. It's just quick and easy. It remembers the setting when you turn the bike on and off. Really, really like the electronics pack on this bike. The maintenance. Maintenance is pretty easy, pretty straightforward on this bike, and I like that. We talked about the air filter access. Fuel economy and range, excellent. So, you know, I've been getting about 60 miles a gallon, which is what, like 3.9 liter per 100 kilometer. So your real world, fuel range is like 250 plus miles or 400 plus kilometers. That's fantastic. Another pro is you don't need to add heavy crash protection. You know, you see all the adventure bikes, they put this big exoskeleton. It weighs like 20, 30 pounds with all the crash bars and all that tying it into the frame, which can cause problems. And then the weight of it, the cost of it. You don't need to do any of that on this platform because you've got crash protection built in. That's incredible. This fuel tank protects your engine. It's not exposed. It's almost like this was designed to go off-road, unlike so many of those other adventure bikes. The downsides to the 790 Adventure. The fuel gauge is weird. So the fuel gauge only reads from half, and then below that, above half, you have no idea. So I just kind of go, but it gives you, you know, fuel economy. It shows you can put all that on the computer. So it's pretty easy to track things. Not really a problem in real life. The suspension is a little harsh, a little bit jittery and bumpy, and you don't really have any adjustment beside rear preload. So that's, I guess, somewhat of a downside. I didn't like the rear preload adjuster. I feel like on an adventure bike, because you're going to be adding luggage, maybe a passenger, differing loads, which is how people use these bikes, I'd like to see a hydraulic preload adjuster, like a lot of the adventure bikes have, because, you know, trying to get a tool to get that preload ring, because you really need to set your sag when you have different weight, and this makes it a lot harder to do without having a hydraulic preload adjuster. Another downside for me is that the optional things that the bike already has the hardware for, like the quick shifter, the rally mode, the cruise control, you have to pay extra for that, and that just bugs me. I don't like that. And then the final con is that reliability is simply a question mark, I think, at this point with this platform. Let's get into the audience questions. Lincoln Andrews, so we'll start with Facebook. Lincoln Andrews, can highway pigs be added without crash bars? No, not really, because there's no like bars to attach highway pigs to. What suspension upgrades are available? There are aftermarket suspension kits out there, Andriani, other cartridges, things like that you can do, and those can have mixed results depending on what you're trying to do. I would say if you really want better suspension, just get the R model to begin with. You're probably going to be better off. Neopetter, does it come with an adjustable windshield? No, it does not. Dork in the road. I think this is a humorous comment. Did it blow up yet? No, it did not. Thank you, Ben. Mike Beeman, does it have cruise control, heated grips? Can you turn on? Yeah. So yes, cruise control, but you have to get the tech pack to unlock it. Heated grips are available as an OEM option. ABS, yes, that's tied to the ride mode. You can configure all that. Chad Bishop Curvis says, how does the bike respond to setting the correct rear sag? And how easy is it or not to adjust the sag? Yeah, because they gave you that preload collar that you need a spanner wrench for, not a hydraulic adjuster. It is, I don't really like that. It is a little bit more work. Aftermarket shock, I mean, I would say if you get one of these, ride it for a while to see if you really need to spend any money on suspension before you start throwing money at it. I think I would probably have a suspension shop tune it. Chris Crawford chimed in and said, you know, yeah, he owns one. He had a suspension shop kind of just tune his suspension and it was way, way better. Okay, this is Chris Crawford again. He's a friend of mine. He bought one of these bikes. He says he had the suspension resprung and set for his weight riding style by Suspension 101. It was transformative. The windscreen isn't too great. He didn't like the low front fender, which I agree with because it can get caught with mud or rocks. He says he decided to live with the stock windshield. He put on the 890R fender. So to get a high fender, he got an AXP skid plate, got a seat concept seat, a pre-filter for the air filter, and he says it's great. So yeah, really good mods. I totally agree with you. That sounds like a great setup. Scott Ridley says, no point in reviewing this bike unless you talk extensively about the camshaft issue. Otherwise, you are misleading people into buying a lemon. Well, I don't agree with that. I don't think I'm misleading people just by reviewing how the bike performs. I've acknowledged that the camshafts are an issue, but I can't, you know, again, I'm not a scientist and I don't know all the answers to this issue, so I'm doing the best that I can. Dave Kincaid, does this windshield fit the Adventure R model? Yes, you can swap windshields between all these. The 23 and later 790s and 890s, they all have the same fairing setup, so you can swap windshields all you want. James Morgan, is the extra $4,800 a cost we should be paying to get, I think he's saying to get the 890R, to help prevent China continuing to overtake the automotive market? We need to protect US and European production. I mean, we could have a whole video about that. I just can't answer that. There's too many factors involved, and world economy is a whole nother subject, and it's very complicated. Paul Monatrizio says, Ian, is this bike more off-road oriented or road oriented? I'd say it's a pretty good half and half split, although I would say maybe road just because of the way that the suspension is set up. Rick Connolly says, if you spent $2,800 on a full suspension upgrade, would you not have an 890R that is more custom tuned for the owner? Well, first of all, I don't think I would I wouldn't do that. Like, I tried that on my 890 base and it was kind of a waste of money. So, and then I ended up just getting the R model. So no, I wouldn't do that. I would look at spending, if you're going to upgrade it, try to find a shop that can do it for under $1,000 just to get it revalved and resprung and go that route. That I would not spend more than about $1,000 on an upgrade. If you're going to do more than that, I would just get a different bike. That's just my opinion. Michael Dobson says, how will side cases mount with that muffler sticking out that far? Yeah, if you get pannier racks, they are a little bit offset. It does push the luggage out a little bit wider, but that's going to be true with most motorcycles anyway. David Andrew McMillan says, what performs better, a used 2021 890 Adventure R or this? The 890 Adventure R performs better, especially off-road. But which one should you buy is a different issue because that's talking about a brand new motorcycle versus a used one and warranties, and that's a whole question. Jeff Elliott says, how's the fueling? Is it better than the Ibex 800? Yes. The fueling on this is perfectly smooth, no issues. It does not suffer from what the Ibex 800 did, although I think that's now been updated. It doesn't have that issue at all. David McMillan, is it better than the T7 off-road? Oh, man. I think a little bit, yeah, because it's a much lower center of gravity. The suspension is, The suspension is kind of equal between them both, I would say. The T7 gives you adjustments and this doesn't, but the T7 suspension stock doesn't feel very good to me personally. So I'd probably give this a slight edge versus a T7 off-road. Okay, moving over to Instagram questions. I really like this comment from Tio Negus. He says, there's too much hate for KTM. It's sad what people claim. KTM is looking into the issue. I mean, I'm summarizing what he's saying. He says you can get an extended warranty. He says that I know many of them with no issues. He has this bike and they have another 790, an older one with over 100,000 kilometers and no real issues. So I think that's a good point. Like there's a lot of these bikes that don't have issues or don't have major issues. And you don't hear about those. You only hear about the ones that have a problem. That's what I'm saying is that when you go to the internet to look at an issue, like it's going to seem like the sky is falling when in fact it may not be. So this guy has a really good point. It's not always the doom and gloom that everyone says. Daniel HMT, does it still get as hot near the legs as the 2023 890 Adventure? I've noticed that the engine heat, I do notice it, but it's not as hot. It doesn't seem as hot as an 890. I can't prove that, but to me it feels like a little cooler than an 890, which I was surprised, was a nice surprise to see that. Here's a question from Ray Wazinski. Sorry about the last name. Can you get lower foot pegs? Yes, there are aftermarket lower foot pegs available if you want to do that. All right, so in looking at all the YouTube comments on my post, there's 270 comments where I asked for questions about the 790 Adventure. Unfortunately, and I'm not blaming you all because I understand, but most of these are just talking about the camshafts. Like I would say 70% of them are, and I just can't, there's so much I can't even filter them out. We've already covered that. It is an issue and I don't know what the resolution will be, and I hope KTM does something about it if it is indeed as big of a problem as people are making it out to be with all the caveats that I've talked about. So yeah, I really can't find any other questions in here. There's some questions about comparisons. We've already done that. So I'll say this, if you have a question that's not related to camshafts, put it in the comments of this video and I will get back to you. Final thoughts on the 2024 KTM 790 Adventure. KTM have taken one of my absolute favorite adventure motorcycle platforms and made a more affordable version of it. And I think that's great. And I think it gives riders a choice to get into a pretty amazingly high-performing bike at a lower, more accessible price point. And if you look at it that way, this is a very, very positive, thing to have happen. And it's a great choice to have in the adventure motorcycle segment around this $10,000, $11,000 price point. This bike is fun to ride. I've really enjoyed my time with it. I like it for all the reasons I've discussed in this video and other videos on 790 and 890 and 901. These are very, very good. You have to factor in all those other things out there which you're already talking about, the reliability, anything like that, and that's an ongoing situation. You've got to factor all that in when you make a decision on a motorcycle. But I really view my role as mostly trying to evaluate the performance and features of the bike and share as much of that as I can with you all and try to stay out of the noise and chatter and drama that everyone else seems to be involved in. That's how I view my role, and I hope I'm doing a good job of that. If there's things I missed about the bike or questions you have, put that down below in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Ride safe, and I'll see you out there.